Good morning and happy Thanksgiving. Welcome to another episode of Cooking from Quarantine. It's Thanksgiving Day. We have made our turkey stock. We have butchered our turkey pieces. We've made gravy in advance. I've also made sweet potatoes, mashed potatoes, and now we are making our stuffing. I love to make stuffing. It's such a weird kind of bread pudding, kind of... It's just a strange side. You never really eat it any other time of year. So I wanted to show you what goes into mine and how we're going to cook it. So first in preparation, I've used two different kinds of bread. I got some stuffing croutons just because I thought it would make things easier, and they're uniform pieces, so I know that they'll cook easily. Usually I go for something that's not seasoned so that I can add the seasoning myself. This, I believe, is seasoned. Traditional stuffing, no sugar added. I don't know, maybe they don't, they smell like they have a little bit of something on them, but, oh, here we go. There's a little bit of garlic and thyme and things like that, but usually I go for plain, but I had to do whatever the grocery store has. So I got that, but I also got one baguette, just a French baguette from Fresh Direct, and I tore it into little kind of crouton-sized pieces. And the reason I did that is twofold. First of all, baguettes are plain, but second of all, the mix of textures of crouton versus baguette is really nice in terms of mouthfeel and making it kind of the whole eating experience more interesting. So some people like to toast the bread that they use before they put it in with their stuffing. What I did is I just left the bag that had the baguette in it open overnight, and so the bread is stale now, which means it'll absorb all the juices and moisture that we're going to put into it, because what we're going to do is create kind of a custard to make this all solidify and become, again, like a bread pudding. This is kind of a big piece, which I will try to break down. There we go. Okay, so also the difference between stuffing and dressing. Now, for some people, I believe calling things dressing versus stuffing is cultural, but the culinary definition is that when it's stuffed inside a bird, it's called stuffing. When it's served in a casserole dish next to a bird, it's called dressing. So technically what we're making is a dressing because I don't stuff my bird, because I don't cook a bird whole. I break it down, I butcher it into pieces, and I cook it that way because it cooks much faster and it's juicier. It's just kind of all around better. So what we're technically making is a dressing, but I'm going to keep calling it stuffing because I guess maybe that's a cultural thing that I call it stuffing. So we have our two different kinds of bread, and again, how much? Well, I'm going to be using a 9 by 13 inch casserole dish, so just enough that it looks like it would fill that. I'm sorry that I keep eyeballing things. This was one whole baguette plus half a box of our stuffing, and the box of stuffing was 12 ounces, so it's 6 ounces of stuffing croutons plus one baguette is what I used. But, you know, again, this is home cooking. It's very much do it to the eye, to the taste, etc. So we have our breads. Then I cut up leeks. I used one leek. Make sure that you wash them very, very carefully because leeks are filthy on the inside. So I cut up one leek small. I also cut up 3 ribs of celery into very small bite-sized pieces. 3 ribs of celery, 2, not scallions, what are these called? Shallots, 2 shallots, but if you only have an onion, I would use 1 medium-sized onion cut up real tiny, like real little. I'm also going to be using pancetta as my base. Some people use sausage, some people use bacon. I find that both of those kind of overpower the dish. I just like there to be a hint of flavor where you're like, oh, is there like a little something in this? Yes, there is. It's pancetta. I buy it pre-chopped. It's like one of the only things I buy pre-chopped because first of all, like I'm a little grossed out handling pork, but second of all, like it's just, make it easy on yourself, don't go nuts, and you only use a little bit. This is a 4-ounce container. I'll probably use the whole thing, but like you don't need much. We need eggs. I'm going to be using 2 eggs plus 1 egg yolk. Again, we're trying to make this custardy, so that's what we're going to be using. I'm going to be using butter just to butter my baking dish, my casserole dish. It's not actually going into the recipe. I kind of don't use much butter in general, even though Thanksgiving is known as this very buttery holiday. I put like 2 tablespoons into like a lot of mashed potatoes. I put a little bit into sweet potatoes, but like in general, I used no butter in my gravy. I'm going to be using no butter in my bird. I'm going to be using olive oil. So yeah, I don't know why people say Thanksgiving is such a high butter holiday. I think that you can, Vashti, I am filming. I think that you can have very flavorful food if you add herbs and spices and other ingredients. You don't have to do it high fat, high cholesterol. Not that my cooking is like healthy, but whatever. I'm going to be using my homemade turkey stock, which we made yesterday. I don't know how much of this I'm going to use. Again, like, I'm sorry, but these are eyeball measurements. But I have a bunch ready to go, and it's fine. If it's cold, it's no problem. Salt, pepper. I throw craisins into my stuffing. That's, of course, optional. I also throw chopped walnuts into my stuffing. That's also optional. Vashti? Vashti. Vashti, come here. Vashti, what else are we cooking today? Oh, and then I use my trio of herbs, which is rosemary, sage, and thyme. I chop them up really tiny. It's about like, I think I used 4 leaves of sage, 1 big sprig of rosemary, and a couple of sprigs of thyme. And that, I think, is it. So now that we have all our ingredients together, and again, the walnuts and the craisins are optional, but I really like them. I think it adds a little something interesting to just the texture of the food that we're cooking. So we're going to start by sauteing our shallots, our leeks, and our celery, and our pancetta. We're going to start with the pancetta, actually, because we want to render the fat down from that. We're going to start by sauteing all of that. So I will meet you over at the stove to show you how we're assembling our dressing. So what we're going to do first is put a medium flame under a large saute pan. Some good olive oil in the pan, just kind of a like small glug. Olive Oil Jones, my favorite olive oil, still not paying me to shill for them. We're going to have our spatula ready. We're going to open up our pancetta, maybe if we can without a scissor. There we go. And basically this is still going to go into the oven later. So, we don't have to cook everything through. We're just trying to render the fat off of everything. Okay, see, and since it's already cubed, it's already in these like perfect little pieces. So it's really it's very easy to use like this. So we're just going to start getting this a little cooked. Lower the heat a little bit. Don't want to scorch our pancetta. And we're going to get our scallion, I keep calling them scallions. They're shallots. We're going to get our shallots ready to go. I like using shallots because I think they're a little bit more delicate than onions. And since I also use leeks in this recipe, that's a lot of oniony flavor, so I want them all to be kind of delicate and mellow instead of like an onion attack. Okay, the fat is starting to render. These pieces are starting to look not quite cooked, but the oil is starting to get a little brownish, so we know that the fat is starting to cook. So let's add our shallots. And again, you want everything to be sort of the same size, not only because it'll cook evenly, but because when you put it on your fork, it actually makes the eating experience of it much nicer. We're just going to allow the shallots to sweat. Looking good. Now you want to be careful with how much you salt this dish because pancetta is salty. And remember the stock that we're going to be putting in it also has been seasoned. So take it easy on the seasoning, but we're definitely going to add our cracked black pepper, which I add to basically everything. I should say I'm not adding garlic to this, and the reason I'm not adding garlic to it is because I'm using so many herbs that I want to sing out, and so I think the garlic would overpower them, but if you want to use garlic, go crazy. You don't have to use the same herbs as me. You know, stuffing, it's home cooking, right? It's pretty informal food, so use what you like. Okay, these shallots are starting to turn translucent, so we're going to add our celery and leeks. And honestly, this is a pretty easy dish because it cooks all in one container, mostly, the difficult part anyway, the sauté part. And it doesn't take terribly long. We just want all the veggies to kind of get to know each other. Some people add mushrooms to their stuffing. I think, I don't like the texture of mushrooms and stuffing because there's so much other, oh, we lost a piece of celery. There's so many other kind of mushy, keep tossing celery out of here. There's so many other mushy textures going on that I don't really love to add mushrooms to that scene. But if you like mushrooms, go for it. I keep knocking things out of this pan. It's already smelling really good. I love the smell of leeks. Look how pretty. I love Thanksgiving. Thanksgiving was never that big a deal in my house growing up because it just kind of felt like we did Jewish holidays really big, and so Thanksgiving seemed like kind of not for us. But as I've gotten older, and actually when I got married, my husband's family, which are much more of the like Mayflower Jews set, they were very into Thanksgiving. So for most of the 15 years that we've been together, I've been going to his family for Thanksgiving. They do huge Thanksgiving, which of course is not happening this year, which is a shame, but there are some very good cooks over on that side. But since I'm usually coming from out of town, I don't usually cook very much for Thanksgiving because his family is in Boston, so, you know, it's not really a holiday that I have gotten to celebrate much in terms of hosting. Usually I host big Jewish holidays, but I don't typically host Thanksgiving. So though I'm very bummed out to not be entertaining this year, it's actually sort of, I mean, it's fun to be cooking the foods I wish I were celebrating with people. We all do, right? Okay, so these are all sweating down really nicely. And I'm going to stop here short of them looking done, because I know that they're going to be cooking more when we put them in the oven, so it's unnecessary for this to cook all the way to like, you know, completely translucent or golden brown or anything like that. You can put them in a little early and they'll stay like a little bit crispy, which is really nice to have in your stuffing. So I will meet you back at the counter where we're going to assemble the rest of this. Okay, so we're now going to take our big bowl full of stuffing stuff and we are going to add everything that we've sauteed to it. This is my heaviest saute pan. It's very difficult for me to lift. Okay, so we're going to mix all of this together, just starting to get it combined. And also to start cooling it off, because we don't want to add eggs to anything too warm, because then we're going to wind up having scrambled eggs in our stuffing, which is kind of gross. So, okay. Necessary. Okay, let's grab our 9 by 13 casserole dish. We're gonna get this guy prepped. Take the butter that we've had sitting out. Again, because I use so little butter in my cooking, I buy good butter. And the difference between good butter and not great butter is the fat content, and also the way, has something to do with the way they like orchestrate the curds. Orchestrate is definitely not the word for that, but you know what I mean. So we're buttering this dish because since we're not shoving this up a turkey, we want it to still, first of all, we want all the sides to brown, and butter is the way that we do that. But also, we want it to come out of the baking dish easily, and butter is the only way to do that. So we're making sure that this is nicely greased before we add anything else to it. Okay, perfect. Put this to the side. Let's add, before we forget, I always wind up like leaving something out of a stuffing recipe because I don't usually cook with this many ingredients. I'm taking a large handful of walnuts and putting it in here. Let's call it a handful and a half. So if your hands are roughly this size, you want 1.5 of these. Sorry, I wish I could tell you better measurements. That looked like about a half a cup, maybe 3/4 of a cup. And our craisins, just to add some sweetness, which I think around the holidays is really nice, but I also like how tart craisins are. If you're a raisin person, I think golden raisins would do really well in this dish. And they also kind of, when you add the stock to it, it all sort of rehydrates, which is really nice. So you get like plump craisins and raisins, etc. I also find that when you mix it properly, all the little bits start to like hide in the nooks and crannies of the bread, and that's like just very satisfying to me. Okay, adding our herbs. Now I'm just going to grab my whisk because again we're making a custard. And for anyone who was watching the show yesterday, I was using a broke-ass whisk. My new whisk came. Ha! This is what I've been waiting for. I wish it had come yesterday, but you know, we don't get everything we want. Okay, so here's the bowl. So what I'm going to do is take my 3 eggs, 1 egg in, and I always do eggs first into a bowl, even if I'm mixing it with something, because that way if you accidentally get a bad egg, you haven't like ruined anything else that's going into the dish. So could be a bit of a lifesaver. So that's 2 eggs. Now the 3rd egg, I'm going to just take the yolk from. So what we do is right into your hand, knock it back and forth. That's how you separate an egg, okay? It's not rocket science, and it certainly doesn't require any kind of like strange kitchen tool. Best tools in the kitchen are your hands. Okay, now we're going to take our 2 eggs and 1 egg yolk. Just whisk that shit. Just nobody beats the whisk. Just do it up. Now we're going to add our turkey stock to this. How much turkey stock? Like, bitch, I just don't know. Am I gonna use this whole thing? I think I'm not gonna quite use this whole thing. I'm gonna add it in and we're gonna see. Okay, so this is cooled off enough that we can add this and see what happens. Again, use those paws. And it's going to take a while until all of this comes together and really congeals nicely. I will say what I'm looking for is I want everything to be coated, and I still want there to be some at the bottom of the bowl when I lift it up, because I know that that's the part that's going to continue to seep in when I put this into the fridge to get happy until I'm ready to bake it. This looks pretty good to me. So I guess we wound up using, this is a 32 ounce mason jar, and so we used roughly half of that for all of you doing the math at home. And now we're going to add this right into our prepared casserole dish. I love the colors on this. It's so pretty. And it already smells great. My dog is out cold, right off screen. Knucklehead. Just on the middle of the floor. Should probably be snoring momentarily. Okay. Okay, and this fits perfectly into our 9 by 13 pan. Let's give our paws a little rinse. And so I'm gonna let this sit in the fridge for the rest of the day. It's 11:30 right now, 11:30 in the morning. I'm gonna let this sit until I'm ready to cook it. So I'll probably take it out of the fridge about an hour before I'm ready to throw it into the oven. When it does go into the oven, it's going to go uncovered at like 375 for like roughly 30 minutes. That's also the temperature at which I'm going to be cooking my sweet potatoes. It's and 30 minutes is how long it takes the turkey to rest. So I know that when I do that math, when I take my turkey out of the oven to let it rest and get its juices re-coordinated, that's when I put the stuffing in, and then everything will be warm at the same time. So this is our stuffing. Happy Thanksgiving. I will certainly post photos of it when it is done and delicious looking, but I think it's actually pretty delicious looking now. So enjoy. Have a happy Thanksgiving.